Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive. We have, as you see on our screen right there, the ever popular Tony Shaffer, president of Project Sentinel, host of the Hard Truth podcast, and just all around great guy, and definitely show fave. Tony, welcome to the show. Welcome to Monday morning.
Danny, always great to be here, and it's good to kick. It's another week already. We're already in the second week of January. It's going fast already. So thank you.
I'm thinking I need to get my Christmas card list already ready. It seems like it's getting closer every day.
I got to send a Christmas card and get well card to Lloyd Austin. Who'd have thought he'd go down and be in the hospital? You know?
Yeah, or that anyone would know about it.
That's right. How do you know these things? We don't tell them.
Come on, man. What is going on with that? How can the Secretary of Defense not tell the President of the United States that he's off the grid, not tell his deputy that he's off the grid? I mean, come on, man. What's going on with that? You've worked with this guy before.
I have, and I've worked at that level, with the Joint Staff and the Secretary of Defense. So let's break this down into its component pieces. First, as you said, how does it happen that the Sec Def doesn't tell his boss, like, "Hey, boss, I'm going to be in the hospital. I'm going to be in even if Austin can't say it because he's in ICU, which is kind of important unto itself. Someone should say, "Hey, Jake, you know that guy named Lloyd Austin? He's in the hospital and he's in critical condition. So you may want to step up here and be aware of this." So this tells me two things. First, the White House doesn't care. Second, the White House is not in touch. As you know, I'm friends with and mentored by the Reagan guys. I'm still friends with Ed Meese. Ed and I meet on a regular basis. He tells us war stories. We have discussions. I was mentored by the late Bud McFarland. God rest his soul, Bud. I miss you. Chris Lehman, who was the nuclear weapons advisor to President Reagan. Chris and I are close friends. John Lehman, his brother, Secretary of the Navy. The one common feature of the Reagan guys, I know for a fact from talking to them in person, they were communicating constantly. Not a day went by that they didn't review the state of things as a team. They were a team, Danny, a team. You've been in command. I've been in command. I've been in directing things. I direct things now. I am constantly in contact with people who work with, by, and through me. Constantly, 24/7, and I'm not dealing with the big
lieutenant stuff. This is not like Secretary of Defense, man.
So that's the first point. Second point: who's in charge? Somebody is still in charge in this chaos, but who is it? Because it's most certainly not the White House, and this explains a great deal. You and I've talked both online and offline about the fact that the responses of this administration are lacking. They're not adequate. They're not timely. They're not uniform. They're not effective. The responses are not effective.
They're not strategic. Let's throw that in there.
So this explains a lot about why they're always behind the curve, because you know what? And the answer is this: it's all about the narrative. They could care less about Americans dying or issues being affected. It's all about how can we spin this for potential benefit to a domestic audience. That's what it's all about.
Or just ignore it if it doesn't fit that narrative. It's like, that's right. Yeah, I don't really care about that. Yeah. I mean, without question, you see it. It's right there for anyone to see. But this whole thing, I got to say, it's just really bizarre. I mean, truly, I meant that. What I said, you're talking second lieutenant stuff, like before you even graduate to officer candidate school. I don't get how you would not make sure that the chain of command is informed, and that your deputy is even aware that you're off the grid and that they're in charge. Right. Kathleen Hicks apparently didn't know until almost 48 hours later. How can that be?
Well, and plus, I guess, it's tough to actually direct things from a beach in Puerto Rico. You know what I'm saying? It's like she probably got the call and she's in her.
And they're not beaches. I've been there, but yeah, it's a little bit more challenging.
Oh, look, we did our final spy school exercise in San Juan. It was great. Look, I was writing contacts on water-soluble paper, sipping a pina colada. Boy, I thought, man, this is going to be a great career. If I get to do this for most of my career, it's great. No, I am not joking. I am completely serious. Anyway, but the idea of the Deputy Secretary of Defense being on vacation, which tells me, first off, no one anticipated this potentially happen, because look, you don't send your deputy on vacation if you think there's going to be an issue. Secondly,
and they're calling this elective, which is curious to me. Like they chose it. So that's another level of potential problem.
Right. And then where's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs in all this? Why didn't they actually have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, which tells me that General Brown, where's General Brown in all this? Because Brown should be the guy standing up and saying, don't worry. Look, I'm here and I'm correct. I'm connected with the president. Tells me he wasn't either. Nobody's minding the store. And because nobody's minding store because the Pentagon only reacts, does not anticipate. And they only react because they react to what the Biden administration wants. They are an extension of political policy, not the factual realities which we face as a nation.
Yeah, and that's some real trouble that has some ramifications for us that go way beyond just whether or not he made a decision like this or didn't take the normal action, because I think it gets to, I don't want to get too far off the trail here, but I think that it really exposes a problem of judgment that we see consistently almost since he's been in office. And this is just a bigger red flag that we've already seen. And I think that probably and I've already seen some headlines already that people are thinking it's time that we need to get a new Secretary of Defense, and this may push him over the top.
So I'm not for. All right, so firing the chef in the kitchen for mismanagement of the restaurant is not the right answer. Okay, the guy sucks as a cook. Well, he sucks as a cook. The analogy being him being the sec def, being a cook, because of the guys that run the restaurant. I don't know what Lloyd Austin could do if he was given actual autonomy. I don't know. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. This was not Austin's fault necessarily. This was an error of the system. The system has been created to facilitate this, and apparently it was elective surgery. So I want to dispel any rumor that he was having the Darth Vader helmet put on permanently. That's not true.
Okay. So that's
whatever you hear.
He
was not being transferred into Darth Vader, although he did look really good with that clear mask at one time over in the Far East. So don't be distracted by this is not the sex you're looking for.
Thank you for that.
Yes. So, but I'm saying the problem is the restaurant. The cook's an important guy, no doubt. But the guy, the reason the cook could just wander off and go to the hospital is because nobody's actually managing the restaurant. Nobody cares. It's all about if they want something, they're going to tell you, and if they and they want to hear from you otherwise. That's why Jake Sullivan, didn't know. I mean, again, I worked at the senior level. I was on the transition team. I know how these people are supposed to operate because I was operating with them. I was helping facilitate messaging and getting people to get things done. Bud McFarland and I had to go over a number of times to do things to be helpful to Mike Pompeo and the secretary and Joe Dunford, because there was communication. Things were happening all the time. What's happening? Well, if things aren't important enough for the SecDef to be involved, what's going on? So.
Right. And so, unfortunately, I didn't plan for it, but it just kind of shows how this tails right into a bigger problem that you illuminate here about who's minding the store and the decisions that are going on at the highest levels. And that has to do with our administration's policies toward the Ukraine war and what's really going on the ground and what's going to be in our interest. Now, right now, there was this past weekend, or maybe it was Friday, I think, a German general came out on European news and openly said, hey, look, the Ukraine side is suffering 30,000 casualties, killed and wounded every single month. And it's it's starting to be a big problem. And that means that according to them, somehow they're saying, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't the German general. It was one of the former prosecutor generals for Ukraine that said, hey, we're suffering this. And so we need you guys to show your patriotism because we need another 500,000 people. And, that should be telling our administration that, okay, the situation is a little more dire. Not that they needed to know that already. They should have already had that knowledge. But you see that, again, this really consistent pattern with what the reality is on the ground does not translate into policy. And they keep going with this fiction and this fantasy. And I want to show you a couple of pics here, or a couple of reports that show just how bad this is getting. Now, the first one is it's almost a free punching bag because you know where this is going, even without seeing the clip I'm going to talk about when I say it's David Petraeus. But here's what he thinks that we should be doing.
I think it's very much in the interest of all NATO and all Western countries to make sure that Russia cannot succeed and that Ukraine is able to liberate all of its territory, join the EU, join NATO, and enable its reconstruction.
So we need to go back to maximalist hope. Forget what happened last year, that the complete and utter failure of all of our plans and processes that he said would work. By the way, we'll just throw that in there. But in fact, it's a matter of right and wrong.
Right. Having already provided a very substantial amount, $44 billion is not trivial. It's very necessary. In my view, this is as right versus wrong as it gets. And we should have no question that if Russia succeeds there, then it won't stop there. Moldova will be the next in the crosshairs, or perhaps one of the Baltic states or some others.
So instead of just right and wrong, in case that wasn't enough, let's throw another scare tactic in there that, oh my God, it's Hitler all over again. He's going to be rolling the West, even though he can't take but like 17% of Ukraine. Forget about that for the moment. But yeah, man, he's going here if you don't keep going. And in fact, a UK colonel, a retired colonel, who's a British spokesman over there, actually said that he thinks it could be World War III.
It's very key that particularly the West, the UK, and NATO countries keep their focus on Ukraine, because if Ukraine doesn't prevail, I agree with the chief security minister of Poland that NATO could be at war with Russia within the next 3 years.
But here's the ground truth, Tony. Here's what's on the ground. I'm going to show you this piece that shows a map of what's been going on. I mentioned that 17% or so of Ukraine. Here's the hardcore truth on the ground.
The red on the map marks Russian positions along the front. Satellite images indicate that Russian troops are reinforcing these areas. More than 8 million landmines are estimated to be buried there. The Ukrainian army has not been able to find a way through.
So all of this Russian stuff that stopped the summer offensive has been increased and deepened to make it even harder. And I'm going to show you one last piece here from somebody who was on our show last week from the front line, who talked about what it looks like in the foxhole looking at that red line.
It was unlike anything else I've experienced in any previous war, and primarily because of drones. From the very start, we were actually hunted by drones that would come one after another once they found our position. So we were caught out in the woods, drones dropping grenades on us, several grenades. It was a completely new experience being hunted by the air, and not really any way to respond to it other than hope that you can get out of the way before a grenade drops. The artillery is unbelievable, probably on average every 10 seconds or so. There's no real way to advance when you can't step out of the dugout even to take a leak without risk of dying from a grenade coming from the sky.
So there is no prospect for Ukraine to eject Russia, get that red line out. Russia's getting stronger by the day. Ukraine is not. They're trying to now add 500,000 more conscripts. What is America's policy, or what should America's policy be instead of this? Yeah, we're just going to keep going as though there's nothing real on the ground.
So going from tactical to strategic, let's just walk through what is at stake. First, he correctly identified the problem. The Ukrainians don't have any ability to control the air, especially with drones. The Russians figured out the mistakes they made regarding drones, and now they're outproducing the Ukrainians something like 5-1. Secondly, he's correct. I mean, you can go on Instagram and watch Russian troops killing Ukrainians when they go out and go to the bathroom. I mean, literally, it's that savage. It's war. And then the Russians are probably dropping something like 20-1 artillery back at them. And then you add on top of that the layers. There's 4 layers of defense that the Russians have built. It's static. They're using attrition as their primary tool of defeat of the Ukrainians, because to your point, Danny, they don't have the troops necessary to breach these things, nor the air support necessary to sustain an offensive. It was never going to happen. I said this a year ago. I think you and I both said this a year ago. Yeah. It's not, the numbers aren't there. They can never win. And yet you have Dave Petraeus, who was literally either completely drugged out on some drug we don't fully understand, or he's being paid to say what he does, because one of the two has to be true. I don't know which one it is, but either he's completely compromised his integrity, or he's on drugs. And let's go to the operational. Did you hear, Danny, that the F-16s are going to win the war for the Ukrainians? Yeah. It's like they're going to show up, and it's going to be like Captain America, just flying around and killing everything.
Throw a shield around. It's going to be awesome.
Oh my God. Yeah. They're going to have the big shield aircraft carriers, with the big wings, and you're going to have Nick Fury directing the airplanes attacking.
It's going to be awesome.
This is the level of fiction that we're supposed to believe that's going to happen when these F-16 shows. It's not going to happen. It's not in the cards. F-16s are a 5th generation fighter, and God bless, it's a Boyd, Colonel Boyd special, the F-15, F-16, A-10, great airframes, F-15EX. If they were talking the F-15EX, maybe I'd listen, because that's an upgraded F-15. It does amazing things, but they're not even getting the top of the line 5th generation. They're getting leftovers from NATO. It's like, okay, I don't think this is a great strategy. So that's the operational level. It's like, yeah, it's. I'll just use it.
And they're not even integrated into any kind of.
It's not even integrated into any operational conflict. So I'll use one word to describe the F-16's entry: stupid. It's not going to have any effect. Now let's go to the strategic. Tony Blinken putting together a rock and roll band that for peace at the State Department is not influencing or affecting our adversaries' thinking. I don't think Vladimir Putin in his New Year's speech or Christmas speech had any concern about anything Blinken, Biden, Lloyd Austin, or anyone else said on the American side, because they know they are literally completely feckless. Nothing can be said. Blinken's over in the Middle East right now as we speak, trying to prevent war. I think he's going to do more to create conditions for war and expanded conflict because of the ineptitude that we've seen on the face of everything the Biden administration does. So when Petraeus comes out, why does anybody listen to Petraeus at this point? I mean, seriously.
I know.
I mean, he has been serially wrong, and either he's on drugs or he's been bought out to lie. I don't know which it is, because he's a smarter man than this. And maybe Paula Broadwell, his biographer, could sneak up and do a second book on who he is now in reality, the naked truth, so to speak. Not that I want them to get naked or anything, but just saying. I think it did happen. That should be the next story, the naked truth with Paula Broadwell and Dave Petraeus.
I can see where that'd be a bestseller.
I think people would pay for
Tony, talking about, I mean, kind of what you're describing is somebody with their head in the sand that's not willing to look at tactical, operational, strategic, military realities. But and this may be a great example of exactly what that is. And this was, I believe, just a couple of days ago by John Kirby when he was asked a question that, hey, the Russian side is starting to really recover from a lot of their mistakes, and their armaments industry is really cranking out shells and stuff. And here's what Kirby said about that.
Our reporting suggests that there is intelligence that the domestic production of missiles inside of Russia has largely recovered, and in fact now the daily production of missiles inside Russia by Russia's own manufacturing system now exceeds what it was pre-war.
I can't speak to the degree to which his defense industry has somehow managed to overcome the pressure. I would argue that we don't believe that it has fully circumvented and been able to thrive under the international economic pressure that he's under. We still believe that the export controls and the sanctions that we and our partners have put in place have had a detrimental effect on his ability, his defense industrial capacity.
That was January the 4th. And by that time already, there had been 3 days of successively unprecedented volumes of missile fire throughout Ukraine. There was another one last night. And you want to say, no, we don't believe it, even though with your own eyes, you see it just crushing stuff all over Ukraine?
Yeah, no, I've said this publicly several times. The very fact that the Russians can use overwhelming and continuous rocket firepower, missile firepower into Ukraine indicates that the Biden policy has failed, period. There's no other way to describe it. There's no sanctions which have been effective. There's no amount of curtailing the access of Russia industry to technology, which has been effective. Right now, Russia, as we speak, will be outproducing Ukraine something like 10,000 to 1 regarding artillery. 10,000 to 1. I'm not joking. I mean, it's like they have a continuous line of production that will simply eclipse anything the West can do to support Ukraine or Ukraine itself. Drones. They've been able to partner with Iran, with the CCP, PRC, whatever you want to call them, and obtain all the advanced technology they need. And oh, by the way, their economy is bouncing right back. I don't know how John Kirby cannot, if you don't want to accept these industrial premises of the Russians doing it, you can't ignore the economy. And by the way, Jandy, do you know what Putin's approval percentage is right now as we speak?
I can't imagine. It's very bad.
80% approval. So Putin, despite John Kirby's protestations and his snappy ties and great suits. By the way, John, I appreciate the fact that you use probably half your salary buying cool suits and ties. I'm one of the.
He does look good. I'll give him that.
You look great. It's better to look good than to feel good, and you look marvelous, darling. Absolutely,
look marvelous.
Absolutely marvelous. Anyway, he does. Absolutely, you look marvelous, John.
All the millennials probably have no idea what we're talking about.
Well, they'll figure it out. Anyway,
it's funny.
Anyway, back to the fact that it's insane is, look, no, the Russians are behind Putin. Putin is doing what the Russian zeitgeist wants. That zeitgeist is now doing economically better. It's going to continue to improve. They're now being able to outproduce the Ukrainians and NATO, not just Ukraine, NATO.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
So if you add NATO into it, okay, it's probably 10,000 to probably 10 to 1. Not 1,000, not 10,000 to 1, but 10. It's a high order of magnitude above what NATO can provide. But there's no path to victory for the Ukrainians.
Now it's more than that, because the Wall Street Journal had a piece last week that's talking about American inventories of our own missiles. It is going to be years, plural, before we can recover what we've already given away. And of course, Ukraine's asking for money and missiles every day. Israel is asking for missiles every day. At some point, we got to say, hang on, this is not going to work. We have to do something different to make sure our national security doesn't suffer.
Well, there's two strategic reserves which have been depleted. First off, you just mentioned our weapons reserve. There's high-tech weapons. Patriot missiles are completely almost gone from what I've heard. We have very little left. You're an Army guy. You understand air defense artillery, ADA. It's like, yeah, we would suck right now if we had to do anything in that regard. And then petroleum, energy. Right now, it's going to take 75 months, Danny, to get back to where we're supposed to be regarding our strategic oil reserve. 75 months.
Whoa.
So you combine that with lack of weapons available in case we have to do something, and adequate petroleum and fossil fuel. Well, it's not fossil fuel. Hydrocarbon reserves is indicative of the fact that even if we wanted to, if we wanted to use one of our strategic plans and activate some military concept, it would be darn tough to do. And by the way, you and I may get called back up because there's now the lowest number of folks in uniform in 50 years, and we don't have a lot of millennials wanting to come in and join because
that's no joke, man. That's no joke.
Yes,
that's genuinely possible. And the problem to me is that there doesn't seem to be enough recognition that even our own industrial base, if we do get into an unexpected war somewhere and we have to sustain combat, over a period like this Russia war going on, Tony, we can't do it, brother. We don't have the capacity.
As Omar Bradley once said, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. And we've been talking logistics. If people pay attention since your show started and since I've been on with you, we've talked about the fact that strategic reserves, be it physical or supporting, that is, the physical availability of wartime stocks are critical. The critical availability of support capabilities such as fuel, petroleum, food, all these other things which have to go into supporting a military. These things are not available for the United States to use in case of a near peer or peer conflict. Remember, Danny, part of our problem is we've been fighting counterinsurgencies for the last, 20 years.
Yeah.
Counterinsurgencies are nothing compared to the land wars that the greatest generation had to face during World War II in Korea. It's not anywhere near what the last time we did this was Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf, and God bless him, he got it right. That was a near peer conflict using the Fifth Corps and some other amazing units, and did a great job. But we have not had an experience nor leaders who understand what we're talking about here for a long time.
And added to that, Tony, the last section I want to talk about here, it again kind of highlights just whose interest are we worried about here. Now you have, and again, this is an easy punching bag. First, I'm going to show you something that Ben Hodges said, because it seems to perfectly align with what Zelensky is saying here. Let me show you first what Zelensky said.
Sure.
Just give me 1 second to spool that up. Where you're coming. Okay, so Gary will punch that up in a second. Sorry, I kind of threw a curveball.
Are we going to see another video of Zelensky doing something with his penis?
Not on this show.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think we are at a tipping point in this war. Clearly, Russia has failed to achieve its objectives, but it has adopted a long war strategy, attempting to convey to the West that they have endless resources by pushing in thousands of untrained troops into the meat grinder. They're willing to accept those kind of casualties for the purpose of conveying that they have endless resources. On the other hand, Ukraine has taken back half of what they lost to Russia in the initial invasion, or at least from February last year, but they have not been able to achieve the decisive effects that they need to actually win this conflict. This is not a Ukrainian failure. This is a failure of the West.
Yeah, and that seems to perfectly tell with what Zelensky says.
To create an arsenal for the defense of freedom, Europe needs joint weapons production, much larger scale production than now. We see that Russia's aggressive ambitions can be stopped only where there is sufficient strength to stop them. And we will provide such strength only together, in solidarity, only by working with each other to strengthen each other.
So Hodges and many of his people who view him, that the Ukraine failure was our fault because of what we didn't do. And you have Zelensky saying, hey, man, we need you. You need me as much as I need you. We got to do this together because, my God, like the British guy said a second ago, they're going to head to the NATO countries and roll in there if we do. But again, it just violates and it just blinds itself to all of the things that are going on the ground and the reality. Yeah. At some point, Tony, if we keep going down this fiction line, I don't even know how it's going to manifest, but something is going to break. And I'm afraid it's going to be something that related to our national security.
So Zelensky is, well, first off, Hodges is lying. The Ukrainians have, as you point out, about 17% of the territory is being held by Russia. Russia sees this as a civil war. Putin even said it during his New Year's Day's comment that they're trying to reunite their people. So first off, we should stay out of it. We tried this back, was it 1917? We sent Marines in to help the White Russians. Didn't work out well. This is a regional conflict. Our job should be to prevent the expansion of the conflict, is what I think Hodges and others want, because he's talking about expanding production. And I just don't see how the Russians want to do this. And the other thing that Hodges lies about is, they're sending in untrained troops. The Russians are actually taking the time to train the troops and put them on the line. This is not a haphazard, let's throw people in and hope for the best like our side's doing. This is methodic, it's well thought, and Putin is using attrition as the primary tool to wear down the West. Yeah. So last time I checked, Danny, attrition does not generate a great deal of offense. The idea is that you're going to be using the other person's offense. And so why would you interfere with the other guy undermining his own policy? So there's no indication of anybody I've talked to, anything I've read, anything I've observed, that the Russians intend a larger expansion of the war. If this was the case, I'd be the first to say it, because we fought them during the Cold War. And yeah, I don't think that they should be given any quarter if they decide to do something against Europe, but that's not what they're planning. So
yeah, and it's self-evident that they're not, and because they're not stupid, because Vladimir Putin, I mean, you look at the stuff that they're making, the stuff that they're doing, the force structure that they're building, it is entirely probably, I think, or at least conceptually, to go up to the Dnieper River. They probably want to get all of the.
I don't think Putin wants it, but I think he's going to have to take it. And they want Odessa.
I think
want Odessa, and they'll probably get
capacity
Odessa
to do that.
Yeah.
That's it. Not even go beyond the western part of Ukraine, much less into a 32-member alliance. That would be practical suicide and almost guaranteeing that we're going to get into nuclear weapons. And Putin's not stupid or self-destructive.
I agree. And not to say that I don't think he'd be willing to, if he thought he was going to lose the war, I think he would consider the potential use of nuclear weapons as a defensive measure.
Agreed.
And at this point, no, he's not thinking about doing anything more than securing the terrain he's got. And by the way, there's an economic incentive. He's going to be taking over some very rich oil and gas reserves in the Donbass and the Black Sea. It's like he'll be happy with those. That's why at this point, it's best to seek some level of negotiated settlement. Again, this is, to me, Danny, this is a regional conflict we should not be in the middle of. So
I completely agree with that. And I pray to God, I know you have lots of conversations with people. I just pray for the day when somebody in the current administration starts listening to you before it's too late, because we don't seem to get
listening to us. I mean, your voice is very important, and the folks in Europe appreciate your clear thinking and factual assessment of what's going on. So, and by the way, shout out to Lloyd Austin. You know, General Austin, God bless you. I hope you recover soon. And
yeah,
and I do. I mean, I'm being serious here. I feel bad about anytime anybody I served in combat with. With that said, you need to get your act together.
Indeed. We'll leave it there. Tony, thanks so much for being with us. Always a pleasure having you on the show. We look forward to the next time. And everybody continue to listen to The Hard Truth, because, man, you just get a taste of it on our show here, but you need to go over there and get a little bit more of your fill like we do. So thanks to Tony. We'll see you next time, and we'll see you all on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.